I made the best and most unique pizza of my life. And I did it without an oven. And not like without a special pizza oven, I literally mean no oven required. And no, it's not clickbait, because today we're actually making a really good welcome. So you might be asking yourself, why am I doing this? Well, you see, my home oven died recently from making too many pizzas apparently. Then I was warming up my outdoor oven and what do you know? The propane ran out. I had basically given up all hope when I thought to myself, could I make a pizza in a rice cooker? And to my surprise, it actually worked. It sits somewhere between a Detroit-style pizza, a DiGiorno, and a fancy French pastry. So to keep things simple, we're gonna start off with my same-day pizza dough. So I'm gonna start off by getting 1.5 grams of instant dry yeast into 220 grams of water. And I'm using water that's slightly above room temperature to kind of get things going a little quicker. And this is the kind of dough that you could make in the morning and have it ready to bake by the evening. But since I got the time, I'm probably gonna wind up letting this ferment for 2 to 3 days in the fridge, but we'll get to that later. All right, I'm gonna break out my trusty stand mixer here. Feel free to do this by hand, but it's gonna take a while and you'll wanna switch arms so that you don't wind up with one bicep bigger than the other. And to our mixture of water and dry yeast, I'm just getting 300 grams of a regular bread flour and 9 grams of salt. I like to start out with the stand mixer on the lowest setting to bring everything together and just sort of let the dough hydrate a bit before kicking it up to the second or third setting and then letting it go for 4 to 6 minutes. And we're gonna take it to the point where we get a more or less smooth texture, just something like this. Then we'll get it onto our board and do a couple hand kneads before getting it into a rough ball for our bulk ferment. And for those keeping track at home, this dough is around a 73% hydration, which is a little bit on the high side, but we're sort of treating this like a Detroit-style pizza, which has a lot higher hydration than your normal round pies. So after 3 to 4 hours, it should have doubled in size, and you'll know you're there when it starts to pull away from the edges a little bit and kind of puff up. That's a sign of good fermentation. Okay, our next step here is to get it out of our bowl, and we're gonna separate this into 3 individual dough balls. And if you want a dough that takes a little bit longer, has a little bit more complexity, check out my Series Pizza video. It utilizes a homemade sourdough starter, but with that said, this same day dough is perfect for when you're in a pinch, and you can lower the hydration level a bit if you wanna make some New York style pies. So once we get them separated into individual portions, I'm just gonna kind of tuck everything into the center, which is gonna start to build tension across the top of the dough. If you're not too confident rolling these out, feel free to add a little bit of flour, but I try to avoid adding excess flour when I can because that's just gonna change the hydration level by the end. And I'm getting each of my dough balls into individual containers, which I've just sort of lined with a little bit of olive oil. And you can dust these with flour instead, but we're actually gonna wind up kind of cooking this in a little bit of olive oil in the end, so it can't hurt to add some more now. If you want these same day, just let them sit out 3 to 4 hours until you're ready to bake. But since I had the time, I'm gonna put these in the fridge for 2 to 3 days because it's just gonna help to build some of that fermented and more complex flavor. All right, let's talk sauce. You can use whatever kind of tomatoes that you want. Recently, I've been liking these Bianco di Napoli tomatoes for the flavor, and they've got great consistency. They're not too watery. All I do is kind of pulse them a little bit in a blender to get it extra smooth with a tablespoon or so of salt. And you can feel free to add some additional oregano, basil, or whatever you want here. Just try not to make a mess of your yellow cutting board. Oh, there we go. And last bit of prep here before we prep our dough. We're just getting some low moisture, full fat mozzarella through a medium-sized grater. I think a grated style cheese is a perfect application for what we're doing today, but feel free to experiment a bit. All right, so if you're refrigerating your dough, you want to take it out at least 3 to 4 hours ahead of when you're gonna bake so that it has time to come up to room temperature and relax a bit. I'm using a little bit of flour here on my board, and hopefully this releases. There we go. So we're gonna press this thing out into a medium thickness, And since we're not worried about developing a traditional style crust, we don't have to worry about not pressing past a certain point. Just kind of open it up however you're comfortable and remove the excess flour because we don't want that burning on the bottom. And we're not too concerned today with sticking because we're going to be cooking it in olive oil pretty much. So we don't have to worry about a big stressful launch into the oven today. And once I get it pressed out into a manageable shape, I'm just going to kind of pick it up and spin it around a bit. Again, do this however you feel comfortable, but we should end up with something like this. All right, so the time has come. We're using a rice cooker, and we're treating this inner pot section almost like the Lloyd pan of a Detroit pizza. It's gonna essentially fry up in olive oil and get nice and crispy around the edges. But since it is a rice cooker, we're not expecting any browning or charring on top, but I got a little fix for us, which we'll cover shortly. Now, this might be the point of the video where you're thinking, this is not gonna work. And I may have had that thought too, but just bear with me because this is gonna be one of your favorite new pizzas, I promise. Our goal for now is to get it as evenly as we can across the bottom. Any spots that kind of curl up aren't gonna get browned, so keep that in mind. Then we'll get a generous portion of our sauce here, and you can feel free to take this pretty close to the edges, if not all the way to the edges. Again, you can just treat this section like you're topping any Detroit style pizza, or you could do cheese on the bottom and then a couple stripes of sauce on top. Kind of just feel it out and have a little bit of fun. One more good move here is to take the cheese all the way around so that it kind of falls down the side and gets a little bit browned and charred. That's kind of one of the key features of a Detroit style pizza, and we're kind of going for that same thing here today. Lastly, I'm just going to top with a little bit of parm and some olive oil. And on my rice cooker, I'm going to use the quick setting, which bypasses any soaking phases and just gets right to cooking. It should take between 30 to 40 minutes. And while you wait, it's important that you fill your time with something productive. All right, it sounds like we're ready, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. All right, the cheese melted nicely, smells good. Now, we really want to make sure that we got some char and cooking on the bottom here, otherwise we'll have to put it back in. And in this case, it's looking perfect, and we got our char. So last thing we got to talk about is how to brown the top. But real quick, if you've been digging the background music, I write it all myself, and it's available on streaming platforms under the artist name Jandre FM. And you can download the files for free on my Patreon, no sign up required. My channel isn't big enough for sponsors yet, but on Patreon, I'll be doing additional recipes, videos, and some behind the scenes. So please consider supporting my work with a paid membership. I'll leave a link down below. Let's talk char. I picked up one of these small butane lighters at the hardware store, and it's surprisingly great for a lot of culinary stuff. From charring peppers to the Kenji Lopez alt method of adding faux wok to things without a wok. You can get the bigger, more intense version, but this works for me. So our goal here is to not get it too close to the cheese, but we want it to have some time to kind of build up the heat on certain sections and give it a chance to bubble instead of just burn right away. I'd say this whole process took me about 3 minutes or so. And if you don't have one of these, feel free to just use your broiler. Last step here is I'm getting a little bit of red pepper flake and some parm. Even though we used parm already, I like to finish with some fresh parm because it just has a little bit of a different flavor. And last thing, I'm going to get some tiny basil leaves on here. Hear that? I didn't think that a rice cooker could achieve that either. Very last thing is to finish with some slow-mo vanity parm. And there it is. Wow. And like I said, kind of a Detroit style, DiGiorno-y kind of thing. If you have some store-bought or frozen dough, you could make this in under an hour. Looks good to me. All right, let's see how it is. Oh yeah, it's so much lighter than it looks. And I'll admit, I had my doubts. But this thing really shaped up to unironically be one of the best pizzas I've ever made. And I've made some good ones. All right, we did it. Give a like, subscribe. Till next time, I'll see you guys later.